Hey there, this is a quick video to kind of walk you through a little bit of Project 1 so that you can see what's involved. So the first part of the project, I just sort of wanted to point out a couple of things. First of all, your calculator, if you're using the TI-84, one of the things, we went over some of this in class, but one of the things, if you go into the Stat menu and then Edit, this first thing, just hit Enter, you can see the different lists. And you can see right away that there's multiple lists, and then all of mine are empty. And I have up through 6, L6. And you're going to need 5 lists to work with. When you hit Stat and Edit, and you don't see L1, L2, L3 like that, then you're going to want to start by going into the Stat menu and then going down to Setup Editor. And what this does basically is it returns any accidentally deleted lists, and it kind of sets everything up to kind of where it was before. So when you run the setup editor, you just hit enter and it runs and it says done. And then if you click on the stat again and edit, you'll see L1, L2, and L3 right there. And mine are all empty, but imagine if you had some data inside one of the lists and you wanted to delete it. You could, if you wanted to, delete each entry, but that takes forever. So instead, go up to the top of the list and hit clear. You want to clear the list, literally clear the data from the list. So you hit clear and enter, and it should clear each one of the lists. So the first thing you need to do is make sure that your L1, L2, and L3, as well as L4 and L5, are all cleared out. If they're not, that could interfere with the problem. And it's very important that you go ahead and clear out the lists in between each one of your trials, because that's going to change. The lists are going to change each time. The second thing that you're going to want to do is take a look at the project itself. And so I'm just going to take a look at the PDF of the project. And so the name of the game here is to find this length, this half of a circle length. And in order to do that, we need to come up with a system for approximating it. So we're going to create a bunch of small points along the curve and then connect them with straight line segments that we can add up together and approximate the distance around the curve. Now, the calculator is going to do most of the grunt work for us, but we need to be able to tell it how to do that. And so we're going to do this with a couple of different types of, a couple of different radius of circles. So a couple of different radii, I should say. So these are the different radii that we're all going to use: 1/2, 2/3, 3/4, 4/5, and 1. And then you're going to pick 2 different radii after that to work with. So you'll notice this diagram down here is just trying to help us out, that this circle extends in the x direction from -r all the way out to +r. So you can imagine kind of the circle starting in the x direction at -r and then going all the way over to here to +r. And in the y direction, it goes from 0 all the way up to a height of r. Okay, so but for our purposes, we care about entry into the function. So we care about what values we're putting into the function, what x values. And in order to find a function, we need to rearrange this equation right here so that it reads as y equals. And since we only care about the top half of the circle, we only care about the y equals the positive root. So when I rearrange this, I can subtract the x squared from both sides, and I have a y squared, and my cursor work here is going to be a pain in the butt, but I have y squared equals r squared, ooh, I'm bad at this, minus x squared. So if that's what I have to begin with, then, and I want to get y by itself, then I can take the square root of both sides by taking the square root. And that's awesome, but when I take the square root of this thing, I have both the positive, the top half of the circle, and the negative, the bottom half of the circle, root to contend with. I only care about the top half. So I'm going to consider this to be y equals r squared minus x squared, all underneath the square root. Okay. And so that's the formula, the general form that I'm going to use for my function. This is my function of x. I just need to know what radius it is, and then if you tell me an x value, I'll tell you the corresponding height of the point along the circle. So that means if I go to the very last page on the document, or the very last 2 pages, this is the results table. So my first equation that I'm going to use in my calculator is going to be this for y1. Now this is using a radius of 1/2, and so that's what I'm going to enter into y1, and that's what I'm going to use for these first 4 entries. The only thing that changes here is not the radius, and it's not the equation in the top half of the circle, it's how big a step that we're dealing with in terms of a change in x. And what do I mean by that? I mean it's the distance that we go from here to where we take a look at the next x value, to the next x value, to the next x value. So it's the change in x each step of the way that produces a point here, to a point here, to a point here, to a point here. That's the kind of thing. And so we're going to connect those with straight lines and approximate the distance along the curve with those little straight line segments. So if we pull up the calculator, and we're going to go to y equals, and the first thing we're going to do is type in our square root of, and I have the new operating system on this, so you can see that it's going to be quantity, the radius squared, so the radius is 1/2 minus x squared. Okay, so our equation's in. If I wanted to, I could take a look at zoom and do a zoom standard if I wanted to see this. It's not going to show up very big because it's a pretty small half circle here. Tiny little thing right there. If I wanted to, I could change my window settings to be able to see it, to go from -1 all the way up to +1, and in the y direction from -1 to +1. Now I don't need to see the negative y, but it'll be a little bit more obvious when I do it this way. Now you'll notice that the calculator is not too good at connecting the dots here, connecting this to the axis here. And that's because the calculator is having trouble making sense of what's going on for those close to -1/2 and +1/2 values. But at the very least, we can see we're dealing with a half a circle. Now what we have to do is find a way to program the calculator to find a bunch of little points along the way to create those line segments. And that's what we're going to do in the next video.